as people are slowly trickling in, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining us. In case any of you don't know me, my name is Cecilia. I work with Marauder, and I've been working with Independent Venue Week for the past 3 years. Thank you so much for joining this panel series. This is the first time ever that Independent Venue Week runs this kind of daytime programming. The session Community Servants, How Your Venue Works with the Neighborhood will start shortly. And with 140 participating venues in 80 cities across 33 states, this edition of Independent Venue Week is shaping up to be our biggest one yet. It also, I think, feels like it's the most urgent and relevant that we've ever had, as we currently are faced with the risk of losing up to 90% of our independent venues in the US. So that is why Independent Venue Week, in another first, is hosting an auction that is benefiting the NIVA Emergency Relief Fund to try to help out some of those venues in the most dire need. We at Marauder, the producers behind the American edition of Independent Venue Week, would like to take this opportunity to thank every single venue, artist, auction donor, and all these wonderful speakers that you're about to get acquainted with. A big thank you for all of you for making this year's event happen. Special thank you to our partners at Eventbrite, Big Room, Ascend Insurance Brokerage, and School of Rock. I urge you to check out independentvenueweek.com for this week's full program and an overview of the auction items. And now I welcome you once again to this session called Community Servants, How Your Venue Works with the Neighborhood. And I will hand it over to Lauren Goshinski.
All right, great, thank you. Hi, everybody. I am your moderator for today. My name is Lauren Goshinski. I am an independent curator and producer of festivals and a variety of audiovisual events. I'm based in Pittsburgh, and I'm a member of the PA chapter of NIVA, but I work all over the world. Recently, I had a curator position at New Forms Festival in Vancouver, Canada. I also remotely am the program director for Public Records New York City, and for specifically their streaming channel, PRTV, which was launched in the wake of COVID. And today I'm going to help take us through a conversation with three great guests. We have JJ Gonson from Once Somerville. Hi, JJ, based in Massachusetts. Tom DeGeorge from Crowbar in Tampa, Florida. Tom.
Thank you.
And then VEE, Hal Reel, from World Cafe Live in Philly. Hey, Hal. All right, are all of our mics working? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so just some housekeeping. I broke this into 4 sections, and I'm letting our audience know that, so that if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Our moderator on the back end, Bobby, is going to collect some of those and pass them on to me at the end of this session, where I'll share audience questions with our participants. So yeah, let's get it started. Round 1, I'd like to talk about community in the age of COVID and what that means to you all. If you could each just take a minute to describe who are you, give us a snapshot of pre-COVID and COVID, what your organization looks like right now, and who is that organization? What does your community look like? Let's start with Tom.
Okay, so my name's Tom DeGeorge. I'm the owner of Crowbar in Tampa, Florida, and we're located within the historic district of Ybor City. Ybor City would be similar to the Red River District in Austin, or Brooklyn, or the French Quarter in New Orleans. We're just a historic district filled with restaurants and bars and nightclubs and little pubs and shops. And so, you know, we know that for every $1 spent at a show, it's $12 spent in your community. So my community, pre-COVID, that's what it looked like. There's about 4 or 5 of our independent ticketed venues in this district, and we help support, you know, all the other businesses that are in the area. So we were shuttered for 7 months, and our governor has opened up the state now with very little restrictions. I did choose choose to open up my room at 20% capacity. And we're trying to set an example for other businesses on how to be safe in our district.
Great, thank you. JJ, let's go with you. What is your situation looking like pre-COVID and COVID? Who are you?
Hi. My name is JJ Gonson. I own a venue in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is right near Boston, called Once. It stands for One Night Creative Experiences. And it's a kind of a, it really is a community gathering place in and of itself. It's a destination for people who want a specific kind of warm hug of a venue. It's a woman-owned and operated venue. We are a safe space. And we work a lot with places like Calling All Crows, and we try to create a safe, inclusive environment. So that used to look like a lot of local bands playing on our stages on multi-band bills, mixing things up as much as we could, and people walking over from our very walkable area. In COVID, it looks like a virtual community. We try to make it a virtual hug. We can see each other in Zoom meetings with performers. We call it the Once Virtual Venue. It lives on YouTube. And we've been doing a little bit of live recording soundstage stuff with like one person and a camera, but mostly it's people from home, but it's a way for us to stay connected until we're no longer virtual and we become physical again.
Great, thanks. And Hal, give us a peek at World Cafe.
Sure. World Cafe Live opened in 2004 in a building we share with WXPN, an NPR station in Philly, from which the World Cafe radio show has come for about 30 years. So we are the physical extension of that virtual World Cafe. We have 2 stages. We do about 400 to 500 ticketed shows a year, and a couple of hundred shows that we don't charge admission for. We were about 70 part-time staff before COVID and about 24 full-time staff. We're now down to about 12 of us, and just trying to keep the pilot light lit. Pennsylvania has reopened partially. Philly has not reopened at all for performing arts venues and music venues. Recently, they liberalized what they considered to be open and said you could have up to 10% capacity, including your staff and including the artists, and you could not serve any food or booze to those people. So we're not open, and that's our status. We'll talk some more about what we're doing to keep the flame lit, but we are not open to the public at this point.
Thank you. I know that's probably, you all probably represent many people's situations right now at different scales. And I think the one really hard thing about like these types of talks and all sorts of like panels that have been going on during the last 8 months is that we're all coming from different backgrounds and regional challenges. However, at the same time, most of us are starting to share in global challenges of monetizing new forms of business, whether that's socially distanced events or trying out your hand at streaming. And so my next question to all of you, it's an open question, which is when everybody's hurting, obviously including yourselves, it's really hard to know what to prioritize. And so I'm wondering for you, where have you had to focus your energy and why?
Go ahead and take a first shot at that if you want.
Yeah.
I would say our priority is keeping the pilot light burning brightly so that when we can return to full operations, we've not been forgotten. We're not a mystery. People know we've been here and know what we're doing, but prioritizing that's definitely a challenge. And I should have mentioned when I described us, a big part of what we do is educational programming and community programming. So for us, a priority has been trying to keep that programming going as much as we can virtually, since we can't do it physically. So specifically, for example, we've worked with the school for the past 4 years, a high school that's in Philadelphia, where we help them turn a janitor's closet into a recording studio. And each year, our musicians have worked with the kids to create an album. One year the theme was the music of Motown, another year it was the sounds of Philadelphia. And the students write the songs, write the music, working with our artists, do the liner notes for the CD. Yes, we actually do a physical CD, do the artwork, and it's a year-long kind of thing. So we had a pivot in March to keep that going. They wanted to keep it going, so we managed to do that virtually. Another example is we have a program that we just started doing with Carnegie Hall. They have a program called the Lullaby Project, where they put new mothers or grandmothers even together with newborns or soon to be expected children, infants, working with an artist, a singer-songwriter usually, to create a lullaby for their child or their soon-to-be child. And that was another one where we didn't know if we could do it, but we pivoted and have done it virtually. And in fact, if you go to worldcafelive.com, you'll see there's a concert this Thursday. It'll be virtual, but for an hour, where these moms and songwriters and kids all do share their lullabies. It's a pretty moving thing. So we're trying to use virtual in a way to do things that are about us, not just another virtual concert necessarily. And trying other things that we can do just to stay in touch with our fans and our community and our staff and our artists and our guests.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Hal. Yeah, I'd like to give you each a chance to speak to this one, specifically about, really having to make that hard choice of prioritizing. And I'll go down the line. Tom, for you, could you describe to us kind of the hard choices you've had to make in your business? Maybe that also includes explaining like what staff are still there and kind of how you're trying to operate right now.
Immediately when things happened, the first thing I did was go out and go after whatever loans and grants that were there. So I wouldn't have to panic over the situation. Then hopefully, those loans can be replaced at some point by grants. The other thing that I did that I'm sure a lot of us did that I feel is important, pre-COVID, we're all leaders in our community. We do different charity events, but during the COVID era, if you want to call it that, I think it's just important to be a leader in your community, to continue to lead. And so I was very, aside from, joining NIVA and becoming the precinct captain here, I've been extremely vocal in my community, speaking in front of city council, working with local elected officials, working with state officials, and just trying to get my point across to how important it is for the arts and for these small stages going forward that we handle things better. And so, yeah, I've been extremely vocal. There's places that aren't taking any precautions out here at all. So I've tried to use my voice and my status in the community to try to influence other businesses to act responsibly and try to educate them and let them know what's at stake. So we can get back to some more normalcy, but trying to explain to them that we're in that new normal phase here right now and that they should be acting appropriately and running their business different, not like nothing's going on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important, obviously, that you all are kind of working in all directions at the same time, but you are clearly kind of choosing where you need to put your energy in order to make the most impact. JJ, I have the same question for you. Where have you had to make these choices when it comes to your community? Can you give us an example of where an area in which you've gone deeper with a certain group of community members to how you're engaging with your staff as your community to provide support for them?
Yeah. So, well, one thing is that I've been trying to organize Massachusetts independent venues to work together. So I actually started Save MA Stages, and I'm trying to aggregate people to sign up and talk to each other to try to get some higher level support, because Massachusetts hasn't pulled together at all in that way. So we're late to the table, but not out. So that's one thing, is just trying to organize in a bigger way. But, the question you asked was, what have we had to sacrifice kind of to, and I'm sitting here listening and trying to think of how to put a name to what I've had to sacrifice. you know, I had to let 18 people go. I had to close my doors of my beloved venue and turn off the lights. Like, it's, I don't even know how to answer that specifically beyond, like, you know, it's all dark. It's all dark and it's beyond painful. So all I can do is continue to make efforts to keep people connected virtually until physically, and also to try to put some energy behind a bigger movement of Massachusetts venues coming together. But boy, that question, I'm just like, what haven't I had to sacrifice?
Yeah, yeah, I know. This is extremely hard. I think that you each point out something really important as a starting point, which is that the idea of holding space, like just making sure that it's still there to come back to, or as Hal puts it, like keeping the pilot light on. As we go through this conversation, like, you know, this will continue to come up, and I'm sure everyone listening is thinking the same thing. And it can be very hard for such an externally focused industry where your activities are so social, and like that activity alone is the generous act of caring for your community. When you no longer can do that, it might not look like you are caring for your community, or you might not be able to feel like you can. But obviously there are things that, internal workings and things that people are doing behind the scenes in order to be able to continue to provide care and support. And so I think getting into that nitty gritty on this talk is important, because you probably have a lot of peers that are going through the same thing. And you might even have artists or fans that don't really know kind of what you have to do behind the scenes in order to continue to support your broader community. So with that, I'd just like to jump into maybe some more specifics with each of you on how you're pivoting, and if you can really speak to maybe the artists or the individuals in your community that you can continue to support. Hal, for you, I want to start with you, because World Cafe had two things going for it before COVID hit, thankfully, which you kind of mentioned before, is that you already kind of existed online because you had World Cafe, the show itself, streaming with NPR. And in December, you were able to turn your business into a nonprofit status business, which as I understand it, really supports the community engagement, the educational aspect of World Cafe. Specifically, what programs could you point to that you're doing right now that are providing like special support during COVID for your community?
Well, I think it's the ones I mentioned before. It's the Lullaby Project, being able to do that virtually, and to some extent our residencies at the schools, but in particular the one school where we do songwriting, which we're going to figure out again for this year, this new school year, as to how we can do that with the students. I think another piece is in response, we really wanted to work with our local music community and the community at large in response to the social justice issues that really came to the fore this summer, and unfortunately, once again, in Philadelphia yesterday, where we had the shooting of a young Black man, and we're all beside ourselves that here we go again. So we have actually gotten a grant to commission a work, especially in honor of the current rising awareness of needs for greater social justice from several artists, teaching artists and working artists in Philly who we've worked with over the years, that's really inspired by the newest awakening, if you will. And they will be actually writing this new piece and doing a virtual concert this spring. And as that's assembled, we will take pieces of it and use that to create virtual teaching opportunities for school students in Philadelphia about the making of the piece, and about really the history and the, you know, all of the social justice issues that are being addressed in this piece. So that's the big project that we're working on. Again, we're trying to do things that are uniquely World Cafe Live, not something that is just generic.
Thanks, Hal. Tom, you made the choice, like you mentioned, to operate at 20% capacity, even though your state is kind of full throttle open.
That's great.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, it's crazy.
Yes. And so obviously making that choice, maybe on the books looks like a hard one, but could you get more specific with us about what that looks like inside your space and how you're able to support and care for local artists at 20% capacity?
Well, you know, that's the thing. We're doing the, you know, pre-COVID, we're a 400-person venue that, you know, standing room only most of the time. So what I did was I changed the footprint of my establishment a little bit. With the blessing of the fire marshal, I opened the space up to make it a little bit bigger. And then we added high tops and stools and chairs and placed them, you know, spread out, socially distanced. Make sure everybody has to wear a mask. And we basically turned the room more into a listening room where when the artist is on stage, everybody's got to be seated. They got to be quiet. They got to be watching the show. And then we have an open air beer garden out back. So if people need to talk or communicate, they can go out there socially distance and talk. And I've tried to, like I said, there's other places that are just acting like it's business as usual. I'm very close to our local artists here in this community. I have a great relationship. We've hosted all types of music. So we do, you know, anything from jazz to blues to hip hop to rap to metal, funk, soul, you name it. So I have a good relationship with our local artists, and I've, you know, reached out to them and said to them, listen, if you feel like you're going to be playing out, you know, I encourage you not necessarily to play my place, but to play at a place that's doing it the right way. And I've tried to meet with local businesses out here. And like I said, just try to convince people to do things the right way. And then on top of that, I'm involved with a group called the Ybor Merchants Association that we get together and we do charity events year round. This past week, we just did, usually it's a pumpkin patch and we give 1,000 pumpkins to underprivileged children, and the parents come and they get the pumpkin and we do arts and crafts and they decorate and then we take a picture. But because we couldn't do that, we had to pivot on that and we turned it into a pumpkin express. I just believed that it was important to still try to do it. These kids aren't going to have a normal Halloween. My wife's a school teacher. She has 25 in-school students, and these young kids, they're just so brave with everything that's going on. And we wanted to try to do something to still give them a little bit of hope. So we did it as a drive-through pumpkin express. And we had little stops where they get their bag, they get their sanitizer, they get their pumpkin, they get their arts and crafts, then they get like 3 candy stops, and then they just drive away. And they never had to get out of the car. Nobody ever had to touch them. But it still gave them some sense, like I said, of a new normal to brighten their days up a little bit. And you know, once again, it just goes back to, I believe that local independent venues, operators, owners, managers are leaders in their community. I think you have an obligation to your community because so many young artists do look up to you, that you're there to set an example for them. And I think it just, if you're not doing that, you're doing your community a disservice. I think it's a part of the job for us, and it's something that I enjoy doing for my community. And so we got to pivot however we can, just to make sure that we're constantly making, even if it's a small difference, you just got to keep pushing forward.
Right. We all know metal folks have soft hearts anyway.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, you're bringing up a good point. Everyone is so far that, like, some people might think that these things don't mesh, but of course it's bigger than aesthetics necessarily. Like, the way you engage with your community is tantamount to
Music is very spiritual.
Yeah. And JJ, with you, I wanted to focus on your streams for a minute, because this is something new, and you're doing that like in lieu of you can't have any kind of physical activity in your space. You also have a catering business, you know, which at certain times would help kind of subsidize the larger operations of your business. And you also mentioned to me the other day that you used to have a contract with Live Nation. And when those things have gone away, in some senses, it's opened up, as you were saying, kind of an opportunity to go back to to the core of what you've always had to begin with. Could you talk a bit about like those artists and kind of how that stream is working for you? And do you see that stream being something that may continue post-COVID?
That's a lot.
Yeah, sorry, it's like a three-parter, but I kind of wanted to
I'll
set
do
you
my
up.
best. You might have to remind me of some of the pieces. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, Live Nation used to rent our room a lot, and that enabled us to do a lot of work with local artists, and we did a lot of the classic 3-band local artist bill. And in COVID, we are like closed until there's a cure in Massachusetts. That's where we're at. So some local artists have taken it on themselves to take care of us. Like they've done live streams in their own Facebook pages, in their own YouTube channels, as fundraisers for us, which has been amazing. So like, they're like, we're the Once community and this is important. And there's these like traditional shows like the Mess Around, which is always kind of these people who get together and they play together and they play their own sets and they, guest on each other's songs. So they're almost more like cavalcade events than shows. And those groups have been incredible. There's a couple of musicians. There was one musician who flat out said, you got to put all your energy into one place and my place is Once. Like they've been incredible like that. So where were we going with that? Help? What was the next?
No, this is great. You're taking us where we need to go. So,
cool. So virtual.
So what we see here, let me bounce off what you're saying is, what I've heard from you is that, and maybe what a lot of people get locked in is this thinking of thinking up, where it's like there are these bigger forces that make things possible for us, right? And the idea that those would go away, whether that's like a relationship with Live Nation or other forms of income, this is all very terrifying that some of these these mechanisms that supported us that were larger than us are gone. But you are showing us that actually the grassroots, like the core of your community and the grassroots community is able to take care of you. And I think
emotionally and our name and how say, except virtually keeping the pilot light on. Whereas really, I mean, Live Nation brought in the people, but it was the bar that was keeping everything going at the end of the day. So you lift out the bar. I used to have nightmares about like losing my license, and having to close.
Yeah.
Somebody
with the artists that are supporting you, that have done fundraisers for your space, that continue to engage as volunteers to run the channel, do you find that this is kind of birthing any momentum for your business going forward? Like, is there enough life like through these streams that you find that there's growth coming out of this?
Yeah, Once isn't going anywhere. We say plastic straws are forever, and so is Once. It's we're in it, man. We're in it to win it.
Right.
This is how we feel, and whatever it is, the community at the end of the day is the heart and soul of us, and we will not stop being the people we are. We will continue to produce music events and live events in whatever way, and right now that's online. I think I hear this a lot, is the virtual arena going to continue after COVID? And I think to myself, after COVID, like, this is going to take a while. Yeah, this is a thing that we're going to do, and we're going to do it. People are going to want to be in the same place, but we all are going to have the ability to stream. So I think it's wonderful that it crosses borders. I love that. You know what else I really love? I love that people who either for financial or physical reasons couldn't get to shows now can get to shows. I love that so much. And I think those positives are going to survive.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because this leads kind of into my next question, which is just a footnote to this section, which is this idea now that there is no going back. The world is fundamentally changed. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will always be as bad as it is right now. But we find ourselves living in an opportunity, as you say, to actually be more accessible in some ways, and to grow our community. And at the same time, we are reckoning with and being held accountable to the idea of regionality. How are you all kind of balancing this when you consider the mission of your organization and who you are choosing to serve and connect with through this time? So maybe I'll bounce it back to Hal for that one.
Yeah, and I can't help but answer that, you know, for 10 years, I talked to different people around the country about the concept of NIVA. And you know, even as recently as February, I had a meeting with Moose in New York saying, listen, now that I'm a nonprofit and I have some resources and I'm going to make some time, I really want to see this industry start talking to each other. And I don't want to step on your toes. You know more people through IVW than any one of us does. Is this something you want to work on together? And we said, yeah, this summer we'll get a bunch of us together and figure out how to do it. And 3 weeks later, we had that first conference call. It wasn't a Zoom, it was a conference call. And, you know, here we are 8 months later, and talk about a community, this community that barely talked to each other. Maybe each of us talked a half a dozen or a dozen at most other venue owners within our city, our region, or nationally. And now look at this, almost 3,000 of us. And it's such a silver lining because there's so much great work ahead of us that we can do when we get past the pandemic. We're locking arms to get through the pandemic. And on the other side of this, it's not over, it's just the beginning of what we're going to be able to do, best practices we can share, you know, whether it's as fundamental as getting better insurance policies for less money, or it's as monumental as changing the lack of diversity in this industry by creating, you know, a real pipeline to train people and to fund more diverse ownership and things like that. So I'm totally about, you know, NIVA at the local level, the state level, and the national level as being the community opportunity that just blew up out of this.
Yeah, thank you, Hal. Hal, and just Tom, really quick, you had mentioned this on kind of our introductory call the other day, just the thought about routing and touring, as these two worlds kind of come back together, like our virtual world and how our physical world can open up. Do you have any sense, like, how are you trying to see your way through this in terms of the communities that you serve?
I mean, I can only echo what Hal just said. You know, like I said, it's locally here, trying to be an example, trying to help the other businesses see their way through it. I talk to people that they're trying to figure out what they're doing next week, and I'm telling them I'm looking at like 2023. You know, like I'm working through the different steps over the next 3 years to get to that light at the end of the tunnel, and then flip it on its side, like Hal said, and use this connectivity that we're all going to have now to better ourselves all over the country. We have a monumental challenge ahead of us, but man, I've never been so impressed with so many people. It's really been a great experience. I talked to many of the different members and the different captains too, and I believe that, you know, just by having each other to lean on, talk to each other, give each other advice, I think the possibilities when we do make it through this, because we will make it through it, are endless. And I'm looking forward to every single one of those challenges. I think it's what gets us most of us out of bed in the morning is the thought of when we beat this, where we're going to go from here. And that's been my focus the whole time.
Thank you. I'd like to kind of zoom up and out a bit, and our kind of collective, our personal and collective responsibilities when we kind of look out into the world. And this is kind of framed under the role of independent venues in the fight for a just and prosperous society. Sometimes maybe it looks like we can't have both at the same time. But I'll preface it with the question with this. Many obviously see that we're suffering through two pandemics. Hal has referenced this already in our talk. You know, we have the acute effects of COVID on top of systemic disenfranchisement and violence towards marginalized folks. And the music industry and arts have often been at the forefront of this, but you know, we have a long way to go, which everyone has acknowledged in different ways on this call. So in a COVID world, like right now, and in what we can imagine a post-COVID world, what is our responsibility as independent venues to play, and what is the role that we can play in both the economic and, more importantly, the social health of our neighborhoods? That's an open question if anyone wants to kind of take it first.
Well, I guess we can start local and go global, but certainly in our neighborhoods, I thought it was wonderful how this summer venues that were able to open their doors for protesters to be able to use the bathroom, and if there was air conditioning and it was hot, cool down, and just to say that we've got open arms, that we, although we're limited as to how much gathering we can foster, we are places that normally are places to convene and gather. And while we like to think of ourselves as places to convene in celebration and in the joy of music, we also need to be places to convene in tough times and consolation and mourning. So I think that's a really important thing to recognize, that, you know, our places have a life that's not just doing shows at night, and have ties to the community that go beyond just going to a concert. So that's sort of, to me, looking at every opportunity we have to be a place for the community to gather virtually or physically is something we all can do. I think in the bigger picture, I'm very excited to participate in the start of the second NIVA organization, which we just announced, the National Independent Venue Foundation. And while, you know, the association is focused on, obviously, the number 1, 2, and 3 priority, getting relief so we all can survive this, the association is going to have a great life as a trade group, and eventually will be supported by dues and help each other do lots of things. But the foundation can focus on some of these systemic issues and, you know, really help us broaden our diversity in hiring and booking, as I mentioned, in ownership and attitude. And to me, that's a huge opportunity for all of us, a huge opportunity for the American music scene. You know, the idea that there are certain kinds of music that you just don't book at certain places, or certain places that don't book certain kinds of music, that's just stupid. That's just short-sighted. That's just, you know, losing opportunity to open the doors up wider for the whole community, which just spells opportunity for all of us, especially independent venues.
Yeah, I think that's a big move. And that is exciting because it also allows us to be a bit more on par with our neighbors to the north and with systems that have been developed in Europe and for quite some time now that acknowledge nightlife as culture with a capital C, and honors that. So hopefully that is a pathway to changing course on some of these systemic problems. I just wanted to, yeah, JJ, go for it.
No, I just wanted to say, with being completely dark and not necessarily having a lot of physical ability, we try really hard to retweet, repost, blast out social media to support you know, good work, especially fundraising, you know, trying to lend our voice and our mailing list. A lot of times we'll drop things into the once mailing list regularly, things like that. So it's not, I sort of feel like we're trying to take the virtual fight from over here while, you know, it's like we're coming at it from all angles. So we try really hard to lend our virtual voice.
That's a good point. And JJ, you bring up something that is, and sometimes can be very subtle, but the difference between co-opting movements or voices versus lending your platform or lending what resources or access you have to help amplify. And I think that that's something that this industry is very sensitive towards, but it's obviously depending on who you are and the context that you're operating in, utilizing your virtual platform to help amplify other folks is critical during this time. And so it's nice to hear that you're doing that and being
I was just
aware
going to
of your
say,
position.
and I was just going to say along that line, I think that you have to be outspoken. Silence is complicit. We have followings. We have, I'm outspoken. I've never been afraid to speak my mind and use my social media to try to make a difference. I've never been afraid to talk in front of groups or do conferences or whatever it is. You know, if there's stuff that's going on in your community and you're not speaking up about it, once again, I feel like it comes with the territory. I believe that people in the community, if they look up to us, it's our job to speak up when we see things that are not right. When I was a little kid, I wanted to grow up to be Batman. You know what I mean? So it's, you know, I became a venue owner instead, but you got to use whatever role you have to not give handouts, but a hand up. We have powerful voices in our communities. And once again, I've always used it locally, but I'm just really stoked to get through this thing and continue to try to make things better on a national level. I think it's important for sure.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I feel like a lot of folks bear the same sentiment. During this time, it is really hard sometimes to know what privileges you even have, depending on the situation that you're in. I understand that everyone can feel very, very small, and you sometimes don't really know what you're working with anymore. So it's nice to hear that all of you are able to see that light in there for yourselves, right? That the pilot light is still it's ticking away. It might be very small, but you're still keeping it there. And I think it's important for people to hear you in how you're kind of processing this and the things that you are finding inside of your own situations. Because I hope that provides folks with a bit of a reminder of their own possibilities and potential. I want to end this and open it up in just a few minutes to questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask you for a thorn and a rose on that note. And what I mean by that is, on the thorn side, is there a challenge that you're facing or have continued to face through this crisis when it comes specifically to serving or connecting with your community? Is there a challenge that you have not been able to get through or that really plagues you right now? And on the rose side, what is keeping you hopeful during this time? So what's the hard stuff and what is something that keeps you going? And maybe we'll start with Hal.
A trick question, a surprise question.
Yeah.
I'd say to me, the thorn is sort of this public expectation that the goal is to open at whatever level you can open just for the sake of being open. And somehow that's, and I'm trying really hard not to be political, but that's patriotic, that's the right thing to do, that's the bandwagon to jump on. And I'm just very realistic about it. First of all, I really care about the safety of our staff, our artists, and our fans. And secondly, I know how tough it is to make ends meet when we're open at 100% capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, financially, I don't think it's feasible. And when you add the operational challenges of the cleaning protocols and security protocols and keeping people at a distance, I think it's really not feasible. So to me, that's the thorn. It's like, you know, I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but no, we're going to open when people are safe, and we're going to stick to it. That's our attitude. Not as soon as we can open to do something and have all kinds of dividers keeping people apart. Our mission is to bring people together. So that's one. And I guess the rose to me is what we've been talking about, the camaraderie at the national level of all of us working together, having a collective voice and letting the public know that this sector exists, that there are all these independent venues, from the 50 cap coffee house in East Chepip, Pennsylvania, to the 5,000 cap amazing venue in downtown DC, and everything in between. And that it's owned by lots of people who are local, making decisions locally, hiring people locally. I mean, that finally having that voice and just starting to get that word out about this incredible resource that we have in this country, that's the Rose to me. And even taking it to the team that we have now, we've all taken such pride at being part of this national movement. We've created a movement. We started with hashtag Save Our Stages. Let's see if we can get some legislation. And it's turned into a movement. And that's just fucking beautiful. Excuse me.
That's great, Hal. It's good to see you get all fired up. You still got energy for it.
You bet.
Tom,
Even at 100.
Yeah. Thorn and a rose. Tom, what are you going through?
I would say, I would say that, and I got to be careful here because I finally got a meeting with the governor's office next week. So if Ron DeSantis is watching this, I will try to be as nice as possible. I think the thorn for me is our the decisions we're making on a state level. It's very concerning to me, and I'm hopeful that when we have our meeting next week, I've got a couple other venues that are going to be sitting in there with me, and we want to just try to explain to the governor how our music ecosystem works and how him trying to open up the state completely is going to cause way more long-term damage to our mission here in trying to get back to some sort of normalcy. So that's probably the thorn. The rose is, that just always having in my mind's eye that vision of completing my goal. If you don't quit, you can't lose. So, I mean, I just always stay focused. I always look for the finish line. I always look to, getting through this and once again, helping the community and helping the people around me and trying to be a positive voice out there and just believing that if we continue to be responsible and continue to push forward and continue to work with our organizations, that we'll see that light at the end of the tunnel.
Great. And JJ, with you, what is the thorn in a rose for you when it comes to serving your community right now?
So obviously, I just heard a lot of the things that I would also say, and I'm so pleased to be on this panel with these two intelligent, amazing people who are we're talking about this national community, and I'm so excited to be meeting people from all over the country too. The thorn is, I mean, I can't say it often enough. The thorn is the pain of not being able to sit in the lobby hanging out with a door person and a security person and a couple of patrons and kibitzing between acts or whatever. That's the pain. And I think the rose attached to that, or the thorn and the rose attached to that, is that we have created these individual connections that maybe weren't there before, where we really look into each other's eyes and talk more. I feel closer to the people that I'm working with in a lot of ways, and very proud of, I've always been proud. We've always been independent. We've always been bootstrapped. We've always been tiny, barely holding on. But, and we've always been a family. We call ourselves the Once Army. We're very tight. But the rose is definitely that. It's the army. It's the people who have hung out and stayed close, but in an even tighter way than before. But everything you guys are saying too, all of it.
That's awesome. Thank you all for sharing and answering my questions so far. I want to open it up to the audience for the next 10 minutes. So select questions are going to be texted to me so that I can just read them out to you. So let me see. I have a few coming in right now. The first question I have, which was sent a little bit earlier is for Tom. And this person is asking, can you speak maybe more specifically inside your business? Can you speak more about the cleaning protocols between shows and how you're keeping people safe?
Yeah, I mean, definitely prior to even knowing what was going to go on, when I was doing the stuff with the city, working with the mayor's office, coming up with different safety protocol for the area, I had went and, like I said, opened up the footprint of my room and then put in high-grade air filtration systems into my air conditioning. Changed some stuff with the bathrooms, added sanitation stations. When we are open, and once again, I'm not at the capacity I'm open. I'm not going to make any money at all because my margins were so small before. So being open with that limited capacity in the room and then adding extra staff just for that very thing, to wipe down tables as soon as somebody gets up, to make sure that trash makes it into a receptacle immediately. I would do a 400 person hardcore show before this happened with 6 security guards, and I'm doing, 75 person folk concert with 10 staff on, just to take care of the stuff, and then doing a deep clean after each show every single time. And that's, doing 2 shows a week. So yeah, you just have to, if you're going to do it, I think you have to spend the money and do it right. And, it's like I said, you want to make sure that we're not negatively impacting anybody or getting anybody sick. So yeah, so that's what I did.
Can I ask Tom a question on that? Are you turning people away?
What's that?
Are you turning people away?
Well, I mean, if we hit our number, then it's already advertised, it's sold out. But yes, I've definitely, to your point that you said earlier, I have it happen a lot where people come up and they're like, well, what do you mean we can't come in? There's plenty of room in there, and the place right down the street is, packed to the gills. Once again, my whole community is establishments. So luckily, I do what I do. I don't tend to let other people influence me when I believe that something is the right way to do something. And even if I'm the only person doing it, I will continue to try to explain to people that they're wrong, that they're all wrong, and I'm right. And there are other businesses in this district that are trying to do things the right way. And there's other businesses in Tampa Bay that are trying to do it right. And I've tried to form alliances with those people where we're promoting each other's businesses to say, hey, listen, if you're one of those people that would like to go out and you don't feel safe going out here in our state because the governor has lifted all restrictions, there are businesses you can go to that are taking responsibility to restrict themselves. People don't always like that, but I believe that if I stick to my guns, the people that are in agreement with me are going to come to my venue when they feel that they need that intimacy. We also do the live streams as well. So, and I believe that with the live stream, I use it to show people. I want to pull back the curtain. I want to show people, like, listen, there's no secrets here. This is what I'm doing here. This is what I'm doing in my room. You can see that people are socially distanced, that they have their masks on, that they're seated. I have nothing to hide from people. I believe that the stream works in my favor in that sense, because then the people at home that are being cautious will see that I'm being cautious as well, and that it can be a safe haven for them if they feel they need to come out and see one of their bands that they like socially distanced.
That's great. Thanks, Tom. I mean, I think that I want to make sure that we get to everyone's questions, but just the 2 points that you both made in that conversation about alliances and transparency, I think are going along, that those actions alone go kind of in every direction, informing and solidifying communities, whether they were pre-established or new, that we need to grow together. And to that point, someone wrote in, they asked a question. I'd like to see us as a collective book acts that route future tours through our venues in a conscious effort to support the independent. Do any of you have any thoughts on this?
I have so many thoughts on that.
Cool. And we have 2 more questions, so give me like 3 minutes of an answer at most.
I just want to say yes. I think that would be fantastic. I'm very afraid of what's going to happen with the moneyed, larger, non-independent bookers who have the ability to own everything. And we were already in tenuous situations with those shows that would come through and we do all the work and get very little off of it except for the bar. And obviously that paradigm has to change. So I love these ideas, but I don't know how you would do it without becoming another one. But I love maybe through NIVA, I love the idea of doing that and getting bands. I mean, bands were already doing it, right? Already rejecting the majors and saying we will only play independent venues, but actually coordinating that effort, I think would be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. And how, I don't know if you just have like any opinion on that, just from NIVA's perspective?
From NIVA's perspective, I'm going to tell you that it is, I think the good thing is that we all are getting to know each other and can talk to each other. The challenging thing is, how do you navigate those waters fairly when people are in competition within a particular location? And how do you navigate the tricky waters of antitrust?
Yes.
Because that's something we have to be very, very careful about as a group and as an association. So I'm not here to say there's no way that we can figure out some structure, but it's not as easy as it might sound.
Yeah.
Nothing is.
But I think it's great. I think it's great that we're all frenemies now.
Yeah, it's a natural outgrowth.
No, it's awesome. I hear it every time I talk to folks that they're like, like, yeah, we all compete, but
right.
we're all
we
family.
still need each other, though.
We still need each other, and it's a natural, helping with that booking idea is a natural outgrowth of just knowing each other and saying,
exactly.
If I'm on the phone with somebody or my talent buyers Jeff's talking to somebody and they say, oh yeah, I got these 3 dates. Say, well, listen, maybe I can help you because I'll call my friend. Well, 8 months ago, he might not have known that person.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. So I'd like to
that
just
alone
really
is going
quick.
to help.
Thanks a bunch. I'd like to make sure there's someone out there, I think their name is Matt. They've had their hand up for a while, and we wanted to let them ask their question out loud if that's something they wanted to do. Are you still there? Give it a minute. Is someone out there named Matt that has a question you'd like to ask out loud? No? Okay, sorry. I think we missed Matt. Sorry, I was trying to get us there so we didn't miss everybody. We have 2 minutes left, so let me just ask this one last question that was texted in, which is, have people seen different community impressions or responses depending on whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit?
Yeah, I mean, there's very few grants you can apply for if you're a for-profit. Very few.
Do you believe that the public perceives you differently?
Yes.
Yeah, they think somehow we're getting rich or something because we're called for-profit. It's like, are you crazy?
Right.
Well, we were a for-profit, mostly a for-profit World Cafe Live until December 1, but we had a nonprofit. The educational program was its own nonprofit. And honestly, I've been very happy to see both within NIVA and in the bigger world, the lines blurring more than ever. I think that our legislation has done that. I know in Philly, there was a COVID relief fund that helped both nonprofits and tried something for for-profits, but I think it is hard. The notion of grants going to for-profits, it's still something that a lot of foundations aren't allowed to do and that government doesn't get. And that's why we've had to work so hard on our advocacy efforts to say, well, in this circumstance, the distinction is non-existent because we all sell tickets, we all book talent, we're all part of our community, we're all part of arts and culture with a capital C, and we're all in the same position. So show us the money.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, everybody. I think we need to end here. We've hit our time.
Great job, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. Good job,
Good
Lauren.
job.
Everybody.
I would like to, oh, I'm sorry, Lauren, go ahead. I
No,
didn't mean
go
to cut
for
you
it.
off.
Nope, nope.
No, I was just jumping in to say thank you guys so much for joining us, both our lovely panelists, our great moderator, Lauren, and everyone in attendance. Join us tomorrow. We're starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow with diversifying your audience, how to book shows for audiences you don't currently draw. You can go to independentvenueweek.com for more details and see the rest of the program, as well as some of the stuff we have going on at venues tonight. And of course, check out these auction items for the fundraiser for the NIVA Emergency Relief Fund. And I won't speak on anyone's behalf, but I'm absolutely sure that if anyone has follow-up questions that they didn't feel like they got answered, I'm sure that every panelist we have here is more than willing to answer as a follow-up. So
And let's hear it for Cecilia and Moose. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Bobby.
Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.